I am way past due to do another review. It's been more than a month since I recorded and uploaded my last one, and for that, I am sorry. Today we're going to be taking a look at an old school death metal band that is instrumental in the creation of the genre itself. They did not create it. They arrived shortly after its creation. Today we are going to be taking a look at a release by the band Massacre. In 1985, Cam Lee left Death and formed his own project called Massacre, which also happened to be a death metal band. 1986, the following year, turned out to be a very, very busy year for the band, as they would release not one, not two, but 3 full demos. Aggressive Tyrant was the first of 3. You can find this demo on my channel. I will provide a link to the playlist in the description below for everyone that wants to go check it out. The second of the 3 demos was a tape of a live recording called Official Live Tape. The final of these 3 was called Chamber of Ages. While these 3 demos did not invent death metal, they are instrumental in solidifying it as a genre. They were well received by extreme metal fans of bands like Possessed, Death, Necrophagia, and Deathstrike. Massacre would break up in 1987 without ever recording or releasing a full-length album. It would be several years before we would get to that point. That same year, Death would release their first album, Scream Bloody Gore, and Necrophagia would release their first album, Seasons of the Dead. These 2, along with 7 Churches by Possessed, would officially establish death metal as a genre. Massacre were not dead yet, though. They would reform in 1989. In 1990, they would release a 4th demo entitled The Second Coming. This new demo was comprised of 100% brand new material that had not been on any of the previous demos. After this 4th demo, the band was finally offered a contract. In 1991, the band inked a deal with Earache Records, who were well known for carrying extreme metal bands. They went into the studio that same year, and on July 1st of 1991, they released their first full-length album entitled From Beyond. This is the subject of today's review. Today we are going to take a look at From Beyond by Massacre. My copy of it is the full dynamic range remastered version from Earache. This version comes with the second release from the band, the Inhuman Condition EP. I will not be taking a look at the tracks from that. I will be just taking a look at the original 9 tracks from Beyond. I might take a look at the Inhuman Condition EP at some point in the future. I am not sure as of this time. This album actually came with a really cool double-sided poster where each side boasts the album art. One side boasts the album art from Beyond, and the other side boasts the album art from the Inhuman Condition EP. This poster is hanging on my wall. I have the side with the From Beyond art showing. I really like the art for this album. That and the other side has Bubble Penis. I really don't want Bubble Penis on my wall, and it is hard to say that with a straight face. It is interesting to note that every single member of the lineup that recorded this particular album was also a member of Death at some point. It's like they were just swapping members back and forth in the early days. The very first track on this album is called Dawn of Eternity. It begins with howling wind and a lot of ambient noise, as one might have expected with a song title like that. It gradually builds up a riff over the sound effects, and the sound effects disappear over time. As the song progresses on, it quickly gets faster and heavier and more extreme, as you might imagine. The vocals on this particular track kick in about a minute in, so you've got about a minute of intro. But if you're a metalhead, you're probably used to that. Go back and listen to For Whom the Bell Tolls and tell me how long it takes to get to the lyrics on that track. It features a very fast and ripping guitar solo that's pretty much par for the course for this kind of music. It's nothing to write home about, but it's not bad either. If you're expecting something on the more technical level of something like spiritual healing, you're not going to get it here. The second song, Cryptic Remains, begins with a little bit of a drum intro before it kicks into the beginning riff to this song. About 40 seconds in, this transitions from the intro riff to the main riff of the entire song. Again, this is very fast and aggressive for almost all of it, and it almost never changes. It does, however, slow down just a little bit between verses. It goes from fairly simple to much simpler about halfway through this song, when it gives us a much more simplistic riff to back the vocals. And it gradually unwinds toward the end, as if a music box slowing down or something similar to that. Track 3 is called Biohazard, and it kicks into the fast and aggressive style of this band immediately. It does feature some of the more technical riffing on this entire album at various points throughout it. There are points on this song where the bass is more audible than it is throughout most of this album, which I actually quite like. And the last 30 seconds of this album or so have some of the best drum work on this album. It's definitely noteworthy. The fourth track on this album is called Chamber of Ages. It begins with a lot of atmospheric and ominous keyboards that are very, very fitting of a song by that title. In fact, there's about a 40-second section of this song that almost sounds symphonic in nature. The guitars on this album don't even kick in until about a minute in, so that's how long it takes to get past the intro to the actual song. When it finally does kick in, you will notice that this is one of the fastest songs on the entire album. It is also one of the better ones. The fifth track on this album is From Beyond, the title track. And again, this is one of the best songs on the album. If you happen to listen to this particular track with headphones on, it does have some very cool stereo effects that you will notice. This is one of the more complex songs that this album has to offer, and when Cam Lee growls the title of the album into the microphone, it is possibly the best moment on this entire album. From Beyond! It's great. There's one section of this song with what appears to be backing keyboards that is rather heavy on atmosphere and almost doom-like with how it plays out. The sixth song on this album is called Defeat Remains. It starts off with a bit of a slower riff, as opposed to most of the rest of the album being very, very fast constantly. The vocals on this particular track start up almost immediately. It does not take very long at all to get to them. Throughout a lot of this song, actually, it is fairly slow. This makes this one of the very, very few instances on this album with speed variation. As opposed to going fast constantly, this song slows down and takes its time. This track does rev it up to full speed for the solo section, however. The seventh song on this album is called Succubus, and it begins with a very awesome scream from Cam Lee that's just badass. This takes it from the slower previous song back to the blistering speed of most of the rest of this album. However, this particular song does contain some very nice drum fills, and further along in the song you will find that Cam Lee repeats the scream that he does at the beginning, and it's still awesome. Track 8 is called Symbolic Morality. It starts with a guitar intro that is backed by loud blast beats from the drums. It goes on like this for about 15 seconds, and then it kicks into the actual first riff of the song. It is noteworthy that this is the last track of original material on this album, though it is not the final track of the album. You will see what I mean in just a little bit. This particular track does have some very nice footwork from the drummer. It's got some great double bass sections. There also happens to be a small interlude that is just the bass guitar playing, and you know I love that. This happens at about the midpoint of the song, and it is one of the coolest moments on the album in my opinion, but I'm kind of biased because I love good bass. Toward the end of the song and throughout the outro, this song really slows down quite a bit. The final track on this album is called Corpse Grinder. It is a song that Death wrote while Cam Lee was a member of the band. There are versions of that song sung by Death, which ultimately makes this a cover track. What can be said about this song? It was written by Death. Death never wrote anything bad. This song is awesome. It is my favorite song on the album, and I don't even care that it's a cover track. It's written by Death. How am I not going to like that? Death was amazing. So this song is great. I love it. 1991 was actually a very, very good year for death metal as a whole. I mean, let's take a look at some of the other albums that released that year. Morbid Angel released arguably their best album with Blessed Are the Sick. Entombed released Clandestine. Suffocation debuted with Effigy of the Forgotten. And Death released Human. That is some incredibly steep competition for this album to go against. Given competition like this, it's understandable how this album would have been lost in the shuffle. This was just another death metal album in a year that was cram-packed with very, very good ones. Honestly, by comparison to the bands that I just listed, what Massacre was doing was well behind the death metal curve. This is stuff that they had written way back in the day, and it had not evolved. By comparison to something like Human or Blessed Are the Sick, this is very, very simple stuff. This ultimately led to reviews that were lower than expected or flat out unfavorable toward the album. This album should have come out in 1987 or 1988. When you compare it to stuff that came out that year, like Seasons of the Dead by Necrophagia, or Leprosy by Death, or at Death's first album, Scream Bloody Gore, this can hold a candle to those. It is comparable much more to those than the stuff that came out the same year as it. It is more simplistic and more on that kind of level. So it would have been much better received, at least in my opinion, if it had been released then. Because this was released in 1991, however, this was seen as just another death metal album. Nothing special, kind of thrown to the side and forgotten, which is kind of sad considering how influential their first 3 demos were. As it stands, this album frequently tends to get overlooked or flat out forgotten by many death metal fans. The hardcore among you, however, probably remember it fairly fondly. As for me, looking back on this album, I don't really think this stands out all that much. I enjoy listening to this album. I don't think it has any bad tracks on it. I enjoy it from beginning to end, and there's not a moment that I don't enjoy. I don't regret buying this album, but nothing about it stands out. For the most part, as soon as this album is over, I remember almost nothing from it. Nothing sticks with me, except for the part in the title track where Cam Lee goes, "From Beyond." That's really the only part of this album that stays with me after I'm done listening to it. Unlike an album like Leprosy, I do not get these riffs stuck in my head later on. This is not an album that I'm going to return to very often, but it's not bad by any means either. For those of you curious about a very important band in death metal history, and one that was there almost from the beginning, check this out. For the rest of you who only want the best the genre has to offer, you could probably just skip this one, honestly. Hey, I've done a whole series of these album reviews before. Click here to check out my review of Final Sign of Evil by Sodom. I still feel that this particular review is my best work. Click here for another death metal review. In this one, I review the album Mortification by the band of the same name. It's a very good one, and I would urge you to check it out. Thank you everybody for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. It would be greatly appreciated. We will talk to you guys next time. Thanks everybody. Bye.